I never imagined the day would come when I'd draw my weapon in my own neighborhood. Not in the line of duty, not for some criminal on the run, but because someone tried to kill my little girl. That morning started like any other. The sun peeked over the rooftops, casting golden light across our front yard. My daughter Emily, always the early riser, had already maneuvered her wheelchair onto the porch, bundled up in her favorite blanket, humming a song I couldn't quite recognize. She's the strongest soul I've ever known. Bright, kind, and tougher than most grown men I've met on the force. But even she couldn't have been ready for what happened next. Our street is lined with identical houses and clipped hedges, the kind of place people assume is safe because it's quiet. But quiet doesn't mean kind. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, ran things with an iron fist wrapped in pastel paint. And at the center of it all stood Karen, sharp-tongued, entitled, obsessed with appearances. For months, she made our lives difficult, masking her cruelty behind rules and citations. Still, I never believed she was dangerous. Not until that day. I was 2 miles away when I got the call. My neighbor's voice was shaking. I couldn't make out the words. Only two stuck. Emily and shot. My heart dropped. Sirens screamed before I even reached for the ignition. And as I sped home, I wasn't thinking like a sheriff. I was thinking like a father whose world was shattering. Before everything turned to chaos, our life was simple. Not perfect, not without its share of challenges, but peaceful in a way that made me grateful every morning. Emily and I had built a rhythm that worked for us. Mornings started with laughter in the kitchen, as I made her scrambled eggs just the way she liked, soft, with a little too much cheese. She'd sit at the breakfast bar, legs tucked under the safety belt of her chair, smiling at every bad joke I cracked. I used to call her my sunshine, because even on the days I was drained from work, one glance at her face could light me up. We moved into that neighborhood for her. After the accident that left her disabled, I needed to find a place that was calm, where I could install a ramp without a fight, and where she could feel included. I thought I found that place. Wide sidewalks for her wheelchair, a school just around the corner. It looked perfect on paper. But soon the cracks started to show. The HOA sent warnings for everything. They claimed her wheelchair ramp was unsightly, and that the lift on my van was distracting to the community aesthetic. I tried to reason with them. I even offered to paint the ramp, to add potted plants, anything to make it blend in. But their complaints weren't really about the ramp. They were about her, about difference, about discomfort. Karen was the worst of them. She never looked Emily in the eye, never offered a smile or a simple hello. Once, she called animal control because Emily's therapy dog barked twice in a single morning. Another time, she left a typed note on our door, demanding we consider relocating somewhere more appropriate for your situation. She didn't even have the courage to sign her name. Still, I kept my head down. I taught Emily to rise above, to smile through it. We focused on our time together, our weekend movie nights, baking cookies, or watching thunderstorms roll in from the porch. It was our little world, quiet and strong. But hate has a way of crawling into the cracks, and I didn't see how deep it had burrowed until it was too late. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, the kind of woman who believed her flower beds and power suits made her untouchable. She lived 2 houses down, in a pristine white home with symmetrical hedges and a flag that hung exactly at regulation height. To everyone else, she played the role of a model citizen. She baked cookies for HOA meetings, hosted garden parties in the summer, and made sure every trick-or-treater got a perfectly portioned candy bag. But beneath that carefully curated exterior was a woman who despised anything that didn't fit her narrow definition of normal. From the moment we moved in, she made it clear that we didn't belong. At first it was subtle. Sideways glances when Emily laughed too loud. Whispered complaints to other neighbours about the van we parked in our driveway. The one with the wheelchair lift she called an eyesore. She never said anything to my face, but her disapproval lingered in every interaction. And Emily, though young, felt it too. Kids are smart like that. They sense when someone doesn't want them around. I tried to give Karen the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just old-fashioned. Maybe she didn't know how to interact with someone like Emily. But that theory crumbled the day she told my daughter to keep her chair off the lawn, because the wheels were damaging the grass. Emily had rolled about 6 feet into the yard to pet a neighbour's dog. That's all it took to unleash Karen's fury. After that, it only got worse. She'd take photos of our front porch to document imaginary violations. She filed noise complaints claiming Emily's ventilator made unnatural sounds at night. Once, I caught her standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, glaring as my daughter and I decorated the porch for Halloween. She didn't say a word, just stood there, judging, as if our joy offended her. I couldn't understand why she targeted us so viciously. Was it our difference? Our resilience? Or just the fact that we refused to shrink in the face of her authority? Whatever it was, Karen's hatred didn't just simmer beneath the surface, it burned. And eventually, it boiled over into something far more dangerous than words. Something we never saw coming. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that made you want to believe in peace again. I had left the house for a quick run to the grocery store just 20 minutes away. Emily, eager to enjoy the sunshine, had asked to sit outside while I was gone. She loved the breeze on her face, the sound of birds in the trees, the occasional bark from the neighbour's golden retriever across the street. It was her way of feeling free, even for a moment. I set her up on the front porch, made sure her blanket was tucked around her legs, handed her a bottle of water, and kissed her forehead before heading out. She gave me her usual smile and said, "Don't take too long, Dad." That was the last time I saw her untouched by what would happen next. Karen came storming down the sidewalk not 10 minutes after I left. She was already yelling when she stepped onto our property, waving a clipboard in one hand and clutching something else in her pocket. Emily later said Karen's voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet like a razor. She was angry about the porch decorations, some little wind chimes Emily had hung that morning, saying they violated HOA code. Emily tried to explain they were gifts from her friends, but Karen wasn't interested in explanations. She started shouting louder, accusing my daughter of willfully ignoring the rules and making the neighborhood look like a charity case. Her words were cruel, spat with venom, and they cut deep. Emily, brave as ever, tried to defuse the situation. She told Karen she would take the chimes down, that she didn't mean any harm, but Karen didn't stop. Her rage grew. Witnesses said she paced like a caged animal, gesturing wildly, ranting about lowered property values and the burden of caretaking on community image. No one could believe what they were hearing until it became worse than anyone thought possible. In a sudden, horrifying moment, Karen reached into her waistband and pulled out a small handgun. Without hesitation, she raised it and aimed it directly at Emily. There was a scream. Someone across the street dropped their gardening tools and ran, but not before the shot rang out. The bullet hit Emily in the stomach. She collapsed forward in her chair, gasping. Blood began to soak through her shirt. Her water bottle hit the concrete and rolled away, untouched. Neighbours rushed to her aid. One man, a retired nurse, applied pressure to the wound, while another called 911. Emily cried softly, trying to stay conscious, whispering my name. Karen didn't run. She stood still, almost proud, muttering something about self-defense and being provoked. She claimed she was afraid, that Emily had threatened her with a sharp object, though there was none to be found. Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. When I got the call, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My little girl. Shot. On our porch. In our safe place. I sped home faster than I ever had, my hands gripping the wheel with white knuckles, my badge burning against my chest like a branding iron. I didn't care about protocol. I didn't care about paperwork or red tape. I was a father now, and someone had just tried to kill my heart. The moment I pulled into the driveway and saw the flashing lights, the blood-stained blanket, the stretcher carrying my daughter, I knew everything had changed forever. My phone rang just as I was loading a bag of groceries into the back seat. I glanced at the screen. My neighbor, Tom. We rarely spoke outside of casual waves and small talk. For him to call me in the middle of a Saturday afternoon, something had to be wrong. I answered, and his voice came through trembling, panicked, barely coherent. All I caught were fragments. Emily, shot, porch, ambulance on the way. The rest blurred into static. My heart dropped into my stomach. I stood frozen for a beat, the world around me spinning. Then instinct took over. I left the cart, left the groceries, and slammed the car door shut with a force I didn't realize I had in me. Sirens wailed in my mind before I even turned on the engine. Every red light became a suggestion, every stop sign a blur. I had raced to emergencies countless times before, but nothing could compare to this. This wasn't another house call. This wasn't a duty. This was my child. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my fingers turned numb. My eyes were locked on the road, but my thoughts were racing ahead of me. Was she still breathing? Where was the bullet wound? How long had she been alone before someone helped? My chest ached with fear and fury. I felt something break inside me, something primal, something cold and burning at the same time. As I turned onto our street, I saw the flashing red and blue lights, the yellow tape already strung across the front yard. I slammed the brakes, barely parking the car before jumping out. EMTs were wheeling Emily toward the ambulance, her small frame pale and shaking under the oxygen mask. Blood had seeped through the front of her shirt, and her eyes fluttered open only briefly as she saw me. I ran to her, grabbing her hand, whispering, "Daddy's here. I've got you. You're safe." Then I looked up, and there she was, Karen, standing near the curb, arms crossed, completely untouched by what she'd done. She looked at me without fear, without shame. She didn't know who I was. Not really. But she was about to learn. Because I wasn't just Emily's father. I was the county sheriff, and her smug little kingdom was about to fall. Karen stood there like she'd just returned from a walk, like the chaos around her had nothing to do with her. She was calm, almost smug, chatting idly with one of the responding officers, as if she were giving a report on a pothole or a noisy neighbor. I watched from across the lawn, my daughter's blood still on my hands, as she gestured with her hands and pointed toward our porch. Her words drifted through the air. Self-defense? Felt threatened. Community safety. It was surreal. She was spinning a story before the truth even had time to settle. I approached slowly, forcing myself to breathe. The officer she was speaking to noticed me, nodded with respect. But Karen didn't flinch. She didn't recognize me. To her, I was just another uniform, another face in the crowd. She kept talking, claimed Emily had rolled at her aggressively, said she thought there was a weapon hidden under the blanket, claimed she saw a metallic glint, some imaginary threat that would justify shooting a 12-year-old girl in a wheelchair. I asked the officer to let me speak to her. He hesitated, but one look at my badge and the rage behind my eyes, and he stepped aside. I kept my voice low, controlled. I asked her to repeat what she'd told the officers. She launched into it proudly, like she had rehearsed every word. "This whole thing could have been avoided if your daughter followed the rules," she said. "This is a community. We have standards. She didn't see the shift in my eyes. She didn't notice the silence that fell between us. She had no idea that every second she kept talking was another nail in her own coffin. "You don't even know who I am, do you?" I said finally. She blinked. "I don't care who you are. All I know is that you're raising a child who disrespects the code of this neighborhood." I reached into my jacket and pulled out my badge, held it right in front of her face. "I'm Sheriff Walker. Emily is my daughter." The change in her face was instant. Her mouth twitched, her skin drained of color. She stepped back, stammering, trying to recalibrate the moment. But it was too late. The lies she'd crafted fell apart right there in the open air. "You shot a child," I said, my voice as steady as it's ever been in an interrogation room. "You lied to officers. You tried to hide behind fear and a title that means nothing outside of your delusions. And you did it all in front of witnesses." She opened her mouth, but no words came. For the first time, Karen had nothing to say. No rules to hide behind. No fake citations. Just the weight of what she'd done, and the man standing in front of her who wasn't going to let her walk away from it. She made a lot of mistakes that day. But the biggest one? Thinking she could hurt my daughter and get away with it. Thinking I was just another father, not knowing I was the law. Karen was arrested on the spot. Once the officers confirmed my identity and reviewed the initial witness statements, it became clear there would be no leniency, no misunderstanding to clear up. She was read her rights while still stammering about homeowner regulations and the threat to the community. But no one was listening to her anymore. Not the officers. Not the neighbors who had gathered in a stunned circle at the edge of the sidewalk. Not even the paramedics who were working frantically to keep my daughter stable. Everyone saw her for what she was now. A woman who let her hate turn into violence. The charges came fast. Attempted murder of a minor. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Use of a firearm during the commission of a felony. But it didn't stop there. The district attorney reviewed the details and added hate crime enhancements. Karen's statements, her history of harassment, her attempt to frame a child with disabilities as a threat, none of it sat well with the law. She had thought her HOA title made her powerful, untouchable. But titles don't mean anything when the evidence is overwhelming, when the motive is rooted in prejudice, and when you've crossed the line from nuisance to criminal. Her arrest made the news that night. Reporters stood outside our neighborhood gates, microphones in hand, baffled at the story unfolding in what was supposed to be a peaceful suburb. Neighbors who once feared Karen began to come forward with their own stories. She had bullied single mothers, written up veterans for having flags that didn't meet HOA dimensions, fined a cancer patient for weeds growing too tall during chemo treatments. One by one, the stories came out like poison being drained from a wound. The facade of control she had built over the years collapsed overnight. Karen's lawyer tried to spin it, of course, claimed she was mentally unstable, suffering from paranoid delusions, and incapable of making rational decisions. But the footage from the neighbor's security camera told another story. It captured the entire encounter. Her words, her rage, the moment she pulled the gun and fired. The jury didn't take long. They found her guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 25 years without the possibility of parole. There was no satisfaction in seeing her led away in cuffs. Just a quiet sense of balance being restored. Emily was still healing, both physically and emotionally. But justice had spoken. Karen would spend the rest of her life surrounded by bars instead of picket fences, her carefully manicured world traded for cold concrete and locked doors. The community changed after that. People started talking to one another more. Neighbors stopped looking away. And the HOA? It was dissolved entirely within the year. The power Karen once wielded was gone. And in its place, something better had taken root. Accountability, compassion, and the courage to stand up for one another. Justice had unfolded, and this time, it didn't come with a clipboard. It came with truth. Emily's recovery was slow, painful, and terrifying. The first few days in the ICU felt like an endless nightmare. Tubes, monitors, nurses whispering in code, and the beeping that never stopped. I didn't leave her side. I slept in the stiff hospital chair, hand wrapped around hers, whispering promises I prayed I'd get to keep. She had lost a lot of blood. The bullet had torn through her abdomen, damaging tissue but miraculously missing her spine and vital organs. The doctors called it luck. I called it a miracle. When she finally opened her eyes fully and whispered, "You didn't let go," I broke down in a way I never had before. Not as a sheriff, not as a soldier, but as a father. Her strength stunned everyone. Even in pain, even while enduring surgeries and therapy, she never once complained. She joked with the nurses, named her IV stand Stan, and insisted on brushing her hair herself, no matter how weak she felt. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. Letters, cards, flowers. Neighbors I hadn't spoken more than 5 words to showed up at our door when we came home. Some with casseroles, others just with tears and apologies. The community that once turned a blind eye to Karen's cruelty now stood behind Emily, ashamed they hadn't done more, but determined to be better. We made changes. I installed a large ramp out front. Not the discreet one we had before, but a wide, beautifully painted one with bright railings and Emily's favorite color. She helped design it, said it should feel like a welcome mat for anyone who needed one. We added a garden beside it, filled with sunflowers, daisies, and a handmade sign that reads, "Kindness grows here." Emily goes out there every morning now, just like before. But this time, she isn't met with stares. She's met with waves, with smiles, with neighbors who stop to ask how she's feeling. She's become a symbol of resilience in a place that once made her feel unwelcome. Our new life isn't perfect, but it's honest. The fear is still there, lingering in quiet moments, but so is the strength that came after. Emily survived hate, and now she lives in a home where love grows louder than judgment, and where no one, not ever again, will silence her joy. There's a moment every parent dreads, the instant you realize your child is in danger and you're not there to protect them. That moment changed me. It burned into my memory, carved into my soul, but it also revealed something deeper than fear, deeper than pain. It reminded me what it means to love without limit, to stand between your child and the worst of the world, no matter the cost. Karen thought she could hide behind rules and paperwork. She thought her title gave her power, but power means nothing when it's rooted in cruelty. And in the end, she didn't face just another neighbor. She faced a father, one who happened to wear a badge, but who would have gone just as far without it. Emily didn't deserve what happened to her. No child does. But from that pain, she rose stronger. And so did I. I saw firsthand how fast hate can turn violent, how quickly silence can become complicity. But I also saw how love can rebuild what hate tries to destroy. To anyone listening, never underestimate the quiet strength of those you try to push aside. Never mistake stillness for weakness. And above all, never mess with a father's love. Because when everything else falls away, when the system stutters or people look the other way, that love becomes something unshakable. It becomes justice. My daughter is alive. She is healing, and she is not alone. And as long as I'm breathing, she never will be. That's a promise no law can write, but one I'll always keep.